Hi, everybody. I'm Kate Wolf, the co-chair and head of programming here and operations at Do the Work. I just wanted to thank everybody for joining the premiere of Hey Fam, our digital content series, as well as the launch of all digital content series coming here from Do the Work. Today, Ira Madison from the pop culture podcast Keep It will be interviewing Aaron Walton, CEO of Walton Isaacson. But before we jump in and I get off screen, I just wanted to let you all know a little bit more about Do the Work. We are a queer grassroots organization and creative community and platform. We look to empower the ad industry and marketers alike to inspire, reward, celebrate queer creativity within the marketing and advertising industry and culture. We know that active inclusion for queer talent will unleash untapped creative potential and advance business. And we truly believe that when we are all our truest selves, everyone will win. But that said, I do want to take a moment to reflect on the unprecedented time and much needed time that our country and the world is going through right now. The fight for inequality and the systematic oppression that plagues people of color in the world today is absolutely unacceptable. To spell it out, we stand in solidarity with the efforts and progress of the Black Lives Matter movement. And we want to thank our queer family members of color who have led the way for LGBTQIA+ progress and equality that we all know today. As you know, we've rescheduled our launch to today to make room for more pressing conversations, but we feel it's important to advance these focused conversations within the queer ad community. And while we maintain focus on the community and the mission within this forum, we remain mindful about how people are feeling, how our efforts ladder up to this larger systemic issue as we all march forward. So in today's session, we have brought everybody together to discuss how we, but more specifically, you guys, stay creative and connect within queer creativity and community during this unprecedented time, and keep inspired to continue to do that damn work. And with that, please welcome Ira and Aaron. Well, slower transition.
Hello.
Technology.
All right. Okay, great. Just that. Hi, Aaron.
Hi, Ira. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Awesome.
Great. Let me just get this started here. Move this. So weird. All right.
Kate, I loved your introduction. I thought it was great. It's so important.
Yes, Kate, you did what you had to do. Great. Aaron, why don't we just get ahead, with where we are. It's quarantine. All of this is happening. How are you staying creative and how are you dealing with it?
Well, it's really interesting, I have my moments, right? I think everyone does in this kind of environment, both between COVID and, all of the drama and the pain that I think we all are facing around George Floyd and the movement. But to answer your specific question, one of the ways that I have just personally started trying to stay centered and grounded is doing a little bit more meditation. One of my nieces has been working on getting her certificate in yoga. And so I become her little guinea pig in terms of working with her remotely, and that has helped. And the other part for me, quite frankly, I am such a fan of all types of music, and that has always grounded me. And so I find myself going back and really spending a lot more time listening to music that has always moved me, and listening to the divas, Anita Baker and Stevie, and one of my favorite artists is an artist named Liz Wright, and so I find myself in those moments that I just need to kind of have that quiet time to kind of re-energize. I really kind of lean into the music space. So for me, I'm sure for everyone, it's a little bit different, but that's kind of just personally what I've been doing to stay creative and to stay present and to stay kind of connected to the work that we have to do.
Of course. And speaking of your work, in finding out so much about you, I was really interested in hearing about you working at Pepsi in the 80s, working with so many iconic artists, like Madonna, Lionel Richie, Michael Jackson, and you were semi-closeted apparently during your early years at Pepsi, and I just want to know sort of what that was like for you, and how you feel like you've been able to be your full self in your work now.
Yeah, great question. I will tell you, excuse me, that I joined the Pepsi Cola Company in 1983, and so it was my first job out of college, and it was an exciting time for me. I started as an analyst, which I loved, understanding data and how data could help tell a story and how data could help kind of really help a brand and understanding what the data said to help a brand grow. And it was an exciting time in the beverage industry because it was, a period we call the Cola Wars, where it was Pepsi and Coke, Pepsi and Coke. And one of the great things that the chairman of PepsiCo, who was a guy named Roger Enrico and was a mentor of mine, understood was the power of pop culture and how tying into that could really help separate Pepsi from the competition, from Coke and from some of the other beverages. And so for me, I was a guy who was constantly kind of tapped into pop culture and to celebrity and really loved what they were doing and how they were going to use entertainment as a way to help differentiate themselves from the competitors. I will say that I wasn't out. It was a very different time in the world. It was a very different time for me personally, quite frankly, and time when I was so focused on my career, so focused on what I had to do to get to the next level, and sadly, I was a little bit nervous about coming out and what that would mean. And you have to keep in mind, now it's a little bit different because the world has changed, not as much as we want it to change, but it certainly has evolved. But that was at the height of the AIDS crisis. And so there were a lot of stereotypes, there were a lot of things that did not exist, that exist now that didn't exist back then. And so I was in the closet, and as I sit back and think about it now, if I were to kind of go back and tell myself, what I could have done better, it would have been to be much more out about who I was and not be ashamed of who I was and what I had to do. And quite frankly, it taught me a very valuable lesson in terms of the type of company that I wanted to create today. And one of the things that I think is so critical, and I will tell you one quick story, I was so focused on covering and the code switching and all of those things. I remember every Sunday I would pick up and I'm not a big sports guy, although, Magic Johnson is a partner in our company, so it's kind of funny to how all that works. But at the time I was like, I wasn't really, ask me anything about a Broadway show, ask me anything about music, I could, recite it top to bottom. But I was so nervous about going into the office on Monday after the weekend that I would always get the New York Times and study what was going on in the sports section just so that I could have the conversation. I could be a part of it. And so I sit back now and think, my gosh, if I had been more comfortable being myself, and if I had been more comfortable about letting my authentic self be out and be free and share that with people, the work would have been better. And part of the reason I believe that to be the case is you don't spend as much time thinking about covering, and you spend more time thinking about, being present in doing the work that needs to be done. And so when I started this company, I was very purposeful in making sure that we created an environment that would allow people to be their authentic self, and creating an environment that would draw in different types of people. And part of it was just, I wanted to have people feel free to do that. But the other part was it was very kind of connected to the business realities of how innovation really happens, right? Innovation happens when you are bringing in people with different points of view. Innovation happens when you are open to new possibilities. And you can't do that when you're kind of siloed and you're focused and you're covering it and just trying to be the same as everybody else. It's work, right? It's not easy because everyone has a different point of view. Everyone is passionate about what they want to do. But the science has told us that when you surround yourself with people that are different and you are working with them and you want to achieve a goal, what happens is people really work hard to prove to you that their point of view is the right point of view. And ultimately, the IQ of the group gets stronger and bigger and better. And those are the moments when you can pick out those innovation, those moments, those sparks of an idea, because they were something that was somewhat different than what you had thought. And I think we've done a pretty good job of doing that. So it was a different time. It was a very conservative company, quite frankly, and I was obviously very liberal, and well, not obviously, but I was very liberal in the way that I was brought up and the way I thought. But I knew that if I created that kind of environment, we as a team created that environment where people could be themselves, they would ultimately deliver a better product.
Great. Yeah. Also, just side note. I mean, you were talking about the sports brief story, and then just even talking about being in the pop culture in '83. And I mean, like, we as people now who are so connected, right? And we work in these digital spaces. We know what like pop culture consuming is like then. Like, what was it like just then? Especially working for a company like Pepsi, where you're like, we need to be seeing what people are talking about. How did you see what people were talking about?
Well, it's really funny, we take for granted now our ability to tap into what's going on in a different part of the world, because we can just go online and we can Google it, or we can do whatever we want to get that information. I remember when I started, I would have to go to the library at Pepsi and pull out these huge books and for data. Now you can do it at the click of a keyboard. How did I do it? I was a junkie for music. So I was reading Billboard magazine. I was paying attention to, who were the producers that were creating the music that was driving culture. I was paying attention to, and I was out, just like traveling and being a part of the community, not just the gay community, but the Black, and really kind of immersing myself in that world. And it was a different way of telling stories. It's funny now, when we first started, I remember talking to record labels, and it's a very different, business model now than it was then. And most artists, a lot of them were very reluctant to even want to do a sponsorship or want to be connected because they thought it was like selling out. And I would constantly have to explain, particularly with Pepsi, which was so progressive in how they were showcasing, celebrities. It was like, this isn't about us doing anything that you wouldn't naturally want to do. This is about us amplifying that. And for music artists, being in a Pepsi commercial seen once was often, they would get a larger audience than they would, if the record company had worked as hard as they possibly could on a particular single, trying to get a lot of people to do it. Now it's changed, right? Now, because the record company, the industry has changed and how they're marketing. Now more and more people want to get those type of deals. So it shifted, and I think it shifted in a way that feels organic to both the brands and to the artists. I remember talking to Pepsi about this new network is coming up that's really going to be targeting young adults, and we got to pay attention to it. And they were like, okay, what is it? I was like, it's this new thing called MTV. And really, and they were looking, and they're going to show these music videos, and they're going to, and the people were kind of looking at me like, what are you talking about? I was like, trust me, this is going to be something that I think we should be a part of. And Pepsi was one of the charter sponsors of MTV, and it was great. And I think as a bonus for me, I got to go to the first MTV Awards where Madonna was doing, around in her wedding dress, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing, this is great. And you know, for me, it was awesome. So it's changed, and I think that the lessons that I learned as a result were really twofold. One, it was important for me to understand their business model and how they worked and how artists felt. And then also, it was, you know, something that I was doing every day in terms of the brand work and working on Mountain Dew and Pepsi. And so I had this kind of great bridge that I could speak to both the artist and to the brands and help marry the ideas in a way that felt organic and real.
Great. Jumping forward a bit to where we are now, this is our first June where, in decades, where, you know, sort of Pride celebrations won't be taking place in person for most of the world. And what are some ways that you've seen the creative community sort of step up to fill some of these gaps virtually? And what are some things that you would suggest people do to get in touch with communities?
Yeah. You know, it's kind of sad because part of the great thing about Pride is being able to be present physically and connect and see the spectrum of people in our community. And there's something that you miss in this COVID environment where that human isn't happening. But I will say that I think is a lot of the things that we're having to adjust to now. There's a upside to it, right? So while I may not be able to participate in the, you know, LA Pride and or New York, wherever it is, because of the technology, I can go online and I can see and hear and learn about Pride festivals in a way that I probably wouldn't have done in the past. So I can do that electronically. I think right now it feels like it's going to be more content driven as opposed to, not that it wasn't before, but there's going to be more of an emphasis on that. And I think that's really important. And then there are ways in which, you know, I look in LA, for those viewers that are here in LA, you know, KABC, which is Channel 7 here in LA, they're going to be doing a 90-minute television special around Pride. So they might not have done that in the past, but there are ways in which, you know, we're going to be able to still participate and still engage in some of the content, which is, you know, at this time in our life is probably just as important as it's ever been. So I'm disappointed, but I'm going to look through the disappointment and look at ways that we can connect.
Great. And what are some like LGBTQ plus ad campaigns or initiatives that you've been involved with over the years that you're particularly proud of, and then maybe might offer some insight into campaigns that people might want to adopt?
Sure. Well, I can tell you two campaigns that I've worked on, both with Lexus actually. One was a series that we did called Inside Out, and we did that in conjunction with Pride Media. And the premise was that we were going to present a forum for LGBTQ members of the community to tell their stories. And so much of what I believe is important is for these stories to get out and for brands to be able to figure out a way that is right for their brand to help tell those stories. So that was really, really great. And we had some amazing members of the community. We had Nikki Nakayama, who was a Asian chef, and she, talked about her story from a perspective of being an Asian lesbian coming out. Daniel Fraziz, who we all know, an actor, and he told his story, and his boyfriend, who were all participating in it. And I'm trying to remember some of the other folks we had in that. Aisha Mills, who was an LGBT advocate and an advisor and a lot of political things. So it was great. The other project that we worked on with Lexis was a series, excuse me, called Icons and Ingenues. And so we married some icons and ingenues together to talk about, what it was like to, at the time we had, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember all the folks that we had. We had these, Alec and some other folks kind of coming out and sharing their stories and giving advice to other members of the community, and it was awesome. So I think for me, it's about telling authentic stories, telling stories that are resonant with not only the brand, but also uplift and show the whole spectrum of people in the community.
Great. I want to ask, you've been a longtime friend of someone in the community, Billy Porter, for instance, who was just highlighted on Hollywood Reporter's first Pride issue. How did you two first meet, and sort of what do you think the long overdue recognition that he's finally receiving now says about how far we've come in queer culture in mainstream media?
Sure. So the first part of your question, I met Billy through my husband. My husband's a director, and knew Billy from New York and his theater days. And so that's how I first met him. And if you know Billy, or if you've ever met Billy, one of the amazing things beyond his incredible talent changed with Billy. He is today who he was then. And I think one of the great things about Billy is that he's used his platform and his popularity to highlight the positive and the negative that he's experienced. So he's been a great friend. I worked with him when he was signed to DV8 Records, which is just distributed through A&M. And one of the things that I really learned from him was never compromising who you are. I think during the time when he was in the industry and the recording, he always had, and I know it was one of the things that the record company was trying to squash a lot of the things that made Billy Billy. And I think for an artist, it's probably one of the most dangerous things you can do. It's soul crushing. And what I learned from him was, that can kill the creative spirit, that can kill your sense of purpose, and you can't let anyone do that. And I'm so proud of him because it's time that people finally saw what all of us who knew Billy saw years ago. I'm waiting for him to get his Oscar, because he will officially have an EGOT. I mean, he's a Tony, he's got an Emmy, he's got a Grammy. So I can't think of someone who deserves it more than he does. And he, to his credit, has stayed close to all the friends and has done everything he can to help them as well. So bravo for him.
He's great. And he's a part of such a great ensemble in the show like Pose right now. Like what sort of queer pop culture is giving you inspiration right now? What are you enjoying watching?
Gosh, there's so much. Well, I will say, I think one of the things, clearly Pose and what Ryan has done with Pose, and then with Glee prior to that, and even before that, what we saw with Will and Grace, and then Modern Family, bring them into the pop culture conversation and showing these families as they are, the good and the bad, I think has been really, really important. People in pop culture right now, I mean, I'm living for Janelle Monáe. I'm really excited because I just got my Andre Leon Talley book on vote. And you know, it's really funny. I just literally got it yesterday and I started reading it.
I have to pick mine up today.
Oh, no, I've got mine right next to me. So, it's great because, you know, as much as an incredible creative spirit, there were a lot of things that I didn't know about him. And so it's interesting. I had no idea he was in a PhD program. I mean, there were so many amazing things about him, and growing up at that time and what he had to overcome was incredible. And other people, like I'm really good friends with Miss J. Alexander, and you know, his boldness, his uniqueness, his creativity are inspiring for me. And then there are people that, you know, that are close to me. There's a photographer, a guy named Cal Yee. He's a big fashion photographer. And I look at his work and I look at, you know, he's a photographer, he's an amazing photographer. And he has, you know, really started to go beyond just photography and started looking at sculpting and jewelry. And it's something that I wish I could do, that I don't have the skill set for. I have the courage, I think, sometimes to kind of go off and try that. But I look at people like that, and I'm you know, so inspired by, you know, what they do. You know, I'm trying to think of some of the folks that inspire me. Alfonso David at HRC, and how he is focused on trying to bring a more diverse conversation, diverse voices into that conversation, I think are great. So, you know, there are a lot of different folks, different points of inspiration that I lean to and love.
Mm-hmm. Getting back to talking about marketing, et cetera, I feel like the past 3 months, we've all sort of seen the same generic sort of standing together message, you know, with that like sad music. It's very melancholy. How can we ensure that, you know, LGBTQ plus causes and, you know, pride and other things sort of don't take a back, and now even really just enhancing Black lives within these movements as well, don't take a back seat as we enter sort of phase 2 and 3 of reopening the country?
Yeah, listen, it's really interesting because, you know, people don't often think about how the LGBTQ plus community has been impacted by COVID, right? We're in the service industries, we're in the travel industries, and so we have been very much impacted by that. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that as we're thinking about how this is impacting communities, we have to understand that it's also got a disproportionate impact on the LGBTQ community. It's got a disproportionate impact on Black and Brown, Hispanic customers, and so we have to make sure that we're doing things that are, you know, as we come out of this, that are more inclusive. I think one of the things that is really critical, and it may not be a popular thing to say, but, you know, measurement matters, and making sure that we are doing things that are more than just anecdotal stories of why we need to be included in the storytelling of the brands is critical. And there are companies, there are, you know, AIM, which is a multicultural arm for the ANA, is doing more and more research in this community. I want to get the name right. I'm going to forget the name, but the data collecting efforts that we have to do are so critical for the brands to understand why this is a great business opportunity beyond just a great social responsibility that we have. And I think the more that we can do that, the more that we can put that kind of information out, the more important it is. It's like the census, right? You got to be counted in order for these dollars to be flowing into the marketplace. So I think part of what our obligation is as an agency, our obligation as vendors and partners is to make sure that we're doing what we can to help educate brands, consumers, executives about the business opportunity in addition to the social responsibility that we have that exists. At the end of the day, they want to sell more products, they want to be responsible, and you know, the social part of it is how we represent and how we showcase the diverse, you know, group of LGBTQ members, and that includes the trans community, that includes all of us. And so we have to do a better job of that. And we also have to, you know, and I have to make sure that I'm doing it all the time. You know, I look at my life as a gay Black man, and I realize that, you know, privilege played a role in my, you know, my working. I have privilege in a way that our Black trans women don't have privilege, right? And so, and it's not a good thing, it's just something that we have to be conscious of. So, so making sure that we're constantly thinking about unconscious bias that we all have in some level, and keeping that in check, and making sure that the stories we're telling around the gay community is not just about gay white men, but there is a range of people that need to be celebrated and need to be honored and need to have that voice and be a part of that conversation.
And you yourself have broken so many barriers in corporate America, and I just sort of wanted to know, are there any leaders or mentors over the years who've helped open some of those doors for you, and sort of what you've learned from them about how to inspire this next generation of people who would come after you?
Yeah, there are so many. I think one who was a tremendous mentor and someone who guided my career at Pepsi and really got my company started, Magic Johnson, who's a partner, clearly is someone who I look at and think, my goodness, what he's been able to do and his purpose in terms of making sure that he is serving the communities that need to be served is critical. There was a publicist that I learned so much from, a guy named Lee Salters, who represented everyone in the heyday. He represented Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, Dolly Parton, Jane Fonda, you name it. And watching him work and listening to kind of his process was important. And then there are people whom I don't have a relationship, but I look at, like David Geffen, and I think about how this man who loves art, loves entertainment, and was able to build an empire and still give back and still be purpose-driven. And then there are people like, you know, Paula Madsen. I don't know if you know Paula, who was the head of diversity and inclusion at NBC Universal. And I watched what she did and how the accomplishments that she's made in her life, and they're inspiring. And I think one of the things that I kind of make the connection between all of them is that they were bold thinkers. They were people who stepped outside of the lines. They were people who pushed everyone forward with a sense of purpose, with an understanding that innovation comes when you're not just thinking about doing the same thing the same way every day. I've learned a lot about the need to give back to the communities that have helped make you there. You know, Clarence Avant, a brilliant executive who, you know, literally transformed the music industry, made people think about Black executives differently, and made people think about Black music differently. And so I look to those folks and hope that I can achieve, you know, 1/10 of what they did. And I know that they're kind of the North Star that I've got to kind of focus on, and will continue to do that.
As we're, still in the midst of this pandemic, how has your mindset shifted a bit, in terms of work, and like how are you already sort of thinking about how you want to maybe live your life differently and do work differently when this ends?
Wow. Here's what I would tell you. I think that the way in which we're working now, which is, virtually, has made me think twice about the need for, big overhead and things like that, because the work is getting out and people are still being productive. And I would actually say in some cases the work is even better because we're like so focused. The other thing that I think for me that has made a big difference is my empathy for people who are working at home, who have kids and have, I don't have kids. My husband and I, we have 2 dogs, which are our kids. You tend to now understand, what it's like to be a mother who comes into work every day, who's got to, deal with particularly, women of color who every day not only are doing the work at the job, but they're also thinking about, when my son or daughter leaves, I've got a worry that perhaps their white colleagues don't have, which is, are they going to come back home safe? And so you tend to think about things differently and start to have a new appreciation for what they're going through and how we need to kind of reapproach things. I would also say that, when we first, and we kind of started working from home a little bit earlier than everyone else because there was so much, so much that we didn't know that was going on, and to make sure that, our first priority, my first priority is making sure that I have to worry about that and the work, right? And so I think that I've just, and I was a little old school in as much as I used to think everyone had to be in the same room at the same time, and now you realize that doesn't have to be. So I think we're learning through it. It's day by day. Things change. You have to be a little bit more fluid, and being able to kind of move with the way things are going in the world, and use science as the barometer for what is the right thing to do versus the wrong thing to do.
Great. Well, we're going to open it up to a few questions from the audience first.
Awesome.
First, second, next. Anyway, next we'll open it up to a few questions from the audience. Our first one is, who's a pop culture icon that's really intentionally changing the world of business right now, would you say?
You mean, well, I think clearly, as I mentioned, I think David Geffen is one of those people who has, changed how people are thinking and how people need to respect and work within an organization. I think the president of Apple is someone whom I look at and think, oh my gosh, he has been so focused in making sure that he creates an environment that is inclusive. And then there are, icons that are not necessarily gay that are still, they're allies that are doing great work. I look at someone like Antonio Lucio, who's the CMO of Facebook, and his focus on making sure that people of color, LGBTQ, like women, like everyone is not only heard at their company, but also putting their agencies on notice to make sure that they too understand the need to have representation if you're going to represent our brands. And so those are 2 people whom I think are, are amazing, different types of people, but still doing some incredible work. And then there are artists that are always pushing the envelope and holding brands accountable, and which is actually really interesting because, you know, for this generation, and I tell clients this all the time, you know, we spend so much time doing research on the consumers that we want to have participate in our brands. We have to now understand that consumers are doing the same thing, that consumers are doing as much homework about the brands that they want to bring into their lives and holding those companies accountable. And so they're looking to make sure that their values are aligned. They're making sure that they're doing their due diligence and their homework and letting companies know about it. And I think that's a perfectly fair thing to do. If you're shelling out money for a product, then you need to know that your money is being spent wisely in supporting the values that represent who you are.
Mm-hmm. Another question is, if the rainbow ceiling is still a thing, maybe it's a little bit more shatterable in the agency world. Sort of, what's your advice for being seen as a leader in circles that often promote people that mirror themselves?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think every organization is a little bit different. I think that I will say, and this may not be a popular thing, I think a lot of the D&I efforts that have been made have not worked, quite frankly. It's not just about bringing in people who are diverse. It's also about giving them a voice. And it's also about making sure that they have a seat at the table. It's not good enough to have gay men and women, LGBTQ folks at a company, and then not let them speak. And so, or not let them have a voice. And so one of the things that I have been working on, and you know, I think about D&I very differently. I don't think about it as diversity and inclusion. I think about it as disruption and innovation, right? That's how we kind of approach D&I. It's a very different. I have worked very closely with a lot of ERG groups at companies where they have a collective voice, and they are, you know, together in their mission to make sure that not only are the employees represented in the right way, but that the company that they love are doing the right thing. So I guess the thing for me that has always worked is constantly educating folks, constantly not being afraid to now be who I am and to be unapologetic about it. And I think the more that we are unapologetic about who we are and what we contribute, the better off we are. And you know, people have to do their homework. And I'm not talking about the LGBTQ community. I think we have to hold the executives accountable for doing the work. We can't always do the work for them. They have to take on an initiative. And part of what I've found is making sure that they understand that their competitors are doing it. And if you want to win, you're going to have to start to look at the world differently, and you're going to have to start looking at your staff for who they are and allowing them to be who they are. It's not easy. Change is difficult because people often feel more comfortable surrounding themselves with other people that look and sound and act like them. But that's not where creativity comes. That's not where innovation comes. And I've never had a client tell me they want to be less innovative. And so part of the path to showing them how to be more innovative is showing them why inclusion and diversity and different thought patterns will help them.
One question from someone that says that they love the point you brought up of measurement matters, and they sort of want to know what the data point you want to see most to help brands understand where we stand and sort of where we need to go.
A couple things. I think one is just pure numbers, right? And by the way, we have to assume that we're not a monolith. The LGBTQ community has, we're as different, internally as the rest of them. So just saying that, we're all the same is a mistake. So I think part of what we have to do is to actually start to get an accurate measurement of how many LGBTQ people are out there, and what are they doing? Where are they? How can we target, and I mean target in a very positive way, how can we communicate and reach them in a way that is meaningful to us? And, it kind of flies in the face, I'm going to call BS on, and now more than ever, our industry for so long has jumped on this total market bandwagon. And for those who might not know, total market is, it was this notion that a lot of companies were selling in, a lot of agencies were selling in to their clients that, hey, we reach everybody and they get our message and that's all we need to do. We just need to expand the message. That was an efficiency conversation. It wasn't a relevant conversation. And for me, the ads in the communication that means the most, that change behavior, that generate purchase consideration, are those that don't just touch the mind, but touch the heart. You touch the heart by creating content that is relevant for the group that you're looking at. So I think part of it is measuring not just the size of the audience, but also measuring how relevant the communication is that you're doing to the different groups that you're trying to reach. We've done it for years with Black, Hispanic, and Asian consumer segments. It's time that we get serious, or brains get serious, about doing it for the LGBTQ community. And by the way, it's not just about it's not just about me, right? It's also about my mom, who's paying attention to, it's about the allies who are paying attention to how brands are communicating to people that they love and that they care about. So it goes way beyond that, way beyond that. But I think those are some of the initial things that I would look at. And community marketing and HRC and GLAAD have got tons of data that kind of, so we have to continue to push for that data to be seen, to be heard, and to be understood and interpreted. And some people they don't know how to do it. Agency partners is to help them interpret it.
Yeah. Speaking of that, a follow-up to that is just sort of, in the midst of Pride campaigns now, it seems like so long that it took, but, allowing space for Black Lives Matter initiatives within their Pride campaigns. But given the long shared histories of both the Black and LGBTQ+ communities, how should brands find a way to sort of address and speak to both causes at the same time?
So I want to make sure I understand your question. So you're asking, how can brands connect to Black Lives Matter and connect to the
LGBTQ+ communities at the same time when they're attacking both
okay,
Pride?
so, listen, I think first, let's understand right now that Black people are getting killed and we got to stop it. And brands, for reasons that are quite obvious, excuse me, have found and understand, I think, that in a way that they didn't in the past. If you dig deeper and you look within that Black Lives Matter movement, you can't talk about Black Lives Matter without also talking about the Black trans community and how they have been so maligned and how they have been so hurt by this. So we can't just think about Black Lives Matter in the sense of straight. We also have to understand it, how it relates to a broader community. And I think at the end of the day, it is about respecting and honoring our lives as Black men and women. And that has to include the LGBTQ community. It can't not. And to separate that out, or to think, by the way, I'm not suggesting that people do that all the time, but I think for me, it's making sure that that is part of the conversation. I think, you know, Billy talked about that a lot and continues to talk about that. So not just Billy, but a lot of people do. So I don't know if that answered your question or if I understood it the right way, but I don't know how you can talk about Black Lives Matter without talking about LGBTQ.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. You know, and even talking about people, you know, sort of Marsha Johnson, you know, and Bayard Rustin, you know, I think it's all tied in together.
Can I tell you, I should have said that Bayard, I'm so glad you brought that up, because talk about a North Star. And I don't know why I didn't even mention him. He is someone, he has one of my favorite quotes. He says, what we need in every community is a group of angelic troublemakers. And I love that. And talk about a pioneer, and talk about someone who, you know, a lot of folks, when I talk about Bayard, don't realize the impact that he had on changing the world, right? It was Bayard who introduced Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to the ways of passive resistance in Gandhi. It was Bayard who came up with the idea for the March on Washington. It was, you know, to Dr. King's credit, when many of the people around Dr. King didn't want Bayard kind of associated with him because of him being gay, you know, Dr. King said, no, you know, this man has, if we are standing for equality, if we are standing for all voices, then he has to be a part of that. You know, I don't know why I didn't think about him, but I'm glad you brought him up. He's great.
I guess last question. Someone asked this as well, but I was going to ask it too. Do you have any favorite stories from your time managing Toni Braxton? I was just thinking about that album recently because it's not available on streaming, Libra.
Oh, so I will tell you. So here's how I started managing Toni. So the record company actually didn't have a manager at the time, and the record company, Universal, we were doing a lot of marketing for brands, and the record company had hired our agency to help market the Libra album. And have a manager, I was kind of another point person on the marketing side, so I was working with her a lot, friends, and I started to understand, you know, what she wanted to do, how she wanted to do it, and she trusted in my instincts, she trusted in what I believed, and she's obviously an incredible performer. And so one of the things that she wanted to do, because, you know, in the record business at the time, it was about touring, and she had 2 kids, and she had some health issues, and so she wanted to, you know, find a permanent place where she could, you know, be in one spot where she could help raise her kids, and I understood that. And so we actually got her out on the road, which the record company was obviously very excited about, and you know, going out and promoting. And then we ended up, and she had one of her sons, which she talks about, had autism, and that's one of the reasons she wanted to be, you know, in one spot to get him the right support and she was on top of it. I mean, she was a mom that was great. And so we ended up going to Vegas, and I did it as a cold call. I knew Gladys Knight was leaving the Flamingo, and I called this guy named Don Marandino, and I said, I've got an idea for you. You need another fierce, amazing diva in that room. Gladys has set the tone. I've got the right person for you. And we kind of got a residency for her there. And it was great. My husband actually directed the show. And it was one of the most creative experiences I had. The challenge was we were so busy, and we were so, like, we were on the road, and then we literally went right into Vegas, that we didn't have time for a lot of rehearsals. So our first show was literally our first dress rehearsal. And of course things went wrong, you know, set pieces weren't going up the right way, and people were walking out the wrong way. It was crazy, but it worked out. And it was a fun experience. She was there we did it for about 3 years. But she was great.
Great. Thank you so much, Aaron.
Oh my God, thank you. I can't believe it's over. Moving so fast.
Hi, Kate.
Hey guys.
Hey, Kenny.
Hey, I'm back, guys. Well, I just wanted to say thank you to both of you. This has been an unbelievable episode of Hey Fam and the kickoff episode for Hey Fam series from Do the Work. A special thanks to Aaron and Ira. You guys have been amazing. But for the people out there, please check out our next episode of Hey Fam or our office hours tomorrow with my co-chair, Graham Nolan. And you can find all the information about this and other series at dothework.com. And that's work spelled W-E-R-Q. The website and also is a place where you can sign up for emails and updates and things like that. Also connect with the community and activities. Again, please follow us at Do the Work on Twitter and Instagram. And of course, you can find us on Facebook and LinkedIn as well. But thank you again for watching. And this was an unbelievable conversation. Again, thank you so much, Aaron. You have been unbelievable.
Yeah.
Ira, you are always the utmost best professional. Love your podcast. Love everything you're doing. This has been fantastic. We really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, and thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, Ira. I'm a fan of the podcast and even a bigger fan now that we've had a little time to talk to.
Great, thank you.
And then at some point, Aaron, I'm going to have to pick your brain about Tony even more because inquiring minds know.
No. The person you really need to talk to is my husband, Andrew, because he can tell you all the creative things that were going on behind the scenes that I wasn't even exposed to. But.
Well, challenge accepted. Tell Andrew my number and we shall chat.
I will.
Well, thank you guys. Thank you to everybody that tuned in. This was a huge moment for us. We're really excited. We're even more excited to continue to do the work. And with that, I'm going to sign off and let everybody have the rest of their day. So bye.
Bye-bye.